like to here pay tribute to the successive governments, to our MPs who conducted a remarkable work in conditions that were very often difficult, but a lot of things have been done. Decisions taken, useful for the country. However, let's be clear, this situation has made our policies less clear and has not allowed us to forge lasting coalitions in spite of all the efforts undertaken that I wish to acknowledge. Added to that was the attitude in certain left-wing MPs of the Unbowed Party that created disruptions in Parliament, worrying for the French people, very often could no longer relate to our institutions. Lastly, the parliamentary equation, let's be clear, was becoming difficult to maintain. Oppositions had said that they were going to present a no-confidence motion in the autumn, so I noted a blockage that prevented the government from acting, which was becoming dangerous for France. And there's the vote that was held on Sunday for the European elections on Sunday, which was clear. It was a vote on Europe, first and foremost on Europe, as I've always said. But the votes expressed placed the far-right forces at close on 40% and the extremes at close to 50%. It's a political fact that we cannot ignore. Our fellow citizens thereby expressed their concerns about security, immigrations, cost of living issues, and said the emotion that they face the tragic situations difficult to pull through even when you're working. So daily difficulties, anger, resentment in towns and the countryside. They said that they were not listened to, respected their difficulty in having access to basic service. To all these messages, we cannot remain indifferent, and we must provide a democratic response. That's why the response, to my mind, could not proceed from changes of government or coalitions that were not possible in Parliament, and the last few days have clearly demonstrated that, but required a dissolution that alone allows things to be clarified. We're at a point where our country has to address a great many challenges and cannot be blocked by extremes, and because it's an act of trust and confidence in our people, in our republican spirit and national common sense. So the return to the sovereign people is, in my view, the only republican decision. Now, this moment is that of clarification, and as I see it, an historic moment for our country. On Sunday, I emphasized that legislative elections should be held in the clarity of what was proposed, and we're there. Since Sunday evening, the masks are falling, and the battle of values is erupting for all to see. It's a moment of truth between those who choose to prosper their own stock in trade and those who want France to prosper. What we've seen these past few days is clear. The Republican right, at least that is in charge, has for the first time forged an alliance with the far right. The extreme right, in speaking of the National Rally, because its leaders continue to say that there are real and false French people rejecting the rule of law. The right and all those who followed Mr. Ciotti, the Republican right, turning their backs in a few hours on the legacy of General de Gaulle, Jacques Chirac, and Nicolas Sarkozy. On the side of the left, the Republican left and its leaders, who, it appeared, had set out clear choices during the European election campaign on social democracy, the social market economy, Europe. They've just joined forces with the extreme left, during the same campaign, was guilty of anti-Semitism, anti-parliamentarianism, sectarianism and breaking ranks with many Republican values. Things are therefore clear today. We have alliances that are contrary to nature, both extremes that agree on just about nothing, if only the positions to be shared, and won't be able to apply any program whatsoever. On retirement pensions, do we think for a moment that Mr. Ciotti, who wanted to go further than the government and increase the retirement age to 65, is going to govern with Mr. Bardella, who for years has been promising the French people, together with Madame Le Pen, to return to 60 or 62 retirement age? We can't really tell. On public financing, do we think Mr. Ciotti and the Republicans following that the presidential majority was too lax and we had to consolidate our publics, but is going to govern with the National Rally, whose program was costed independently by a cost of at least 100 billion euros per year for our taxpayer? On these essential points of life, what is the consistency that unite these people to govern? Because that's what it's about tomorrow. On the other hand, what the Social Democrat MPs who are teaming up with the unbowed France on aid to Ukraine. Some want to help Ukraine, others want to help Russia. What are they going to decide on the Middle East? What are they going to decide about the values of the Republic in relation to Parliament? What will they decide about nuclear power and energy on each of these key issues? And I could run through the list. They believe the opposite. So these alliances are just tinkering of parties, but in no sense a majority to govern. On our side, we have the progressive central bloc, democratic and republic, this bloc that unites political families that each have their own identity, has learned to work together for 7 years now. It's united and clear in how it views the Republic, Europe, and it's the bedrock of a consistent government project that I believe is useful for the country. We're not perfect. We haven't done everything well, but we've achieved results. We've protected the French people during crises, and above all, we'll be able to act in order to reindustrialize the country, move to full unemployment, strengthen our public services, accelerate the energy transition, guarantee the country's unity, facing against forces of hatred, reject brutal relations, help Ukraine and Europe address the challenges today and tomorrow of our fellow citizens. This current presidential majority, I would like its leaders to talk to individuals and forces that are not members of it today. Above all, on the 30th of June and 7th of July, the French people should elect a maximum number of MPs from the majority, but should come together before or after, men and women of goodwill, who together will have been able to say no to extremes, but will be in a position to build a common project that is both sincere and useful for the country. Between now and the election, or once the election over, we'll believe, and I say that we must, and we will need to have an exacting, constructive and open dialogue and think of the best way of serving France together. And I say here, bring together and not rally, because I'm aware of the disagreements that exist on certain issues with the leaders of these political parties. I'm convinced that social democrats, radicals, environmentalists, Christian Democrats, Gaullists, and more broadly, many of our fellow citizens and political leaders who don't recognize themselves in the extremist fever, who can rally around some clear policies that are upheld by the current majority, can work with these leaders and build a new program, a federation of projects in order to govern, to act at the service of the French people and the Republic. And for that, we must be clear as to the ideal we're pursuing. There are some priority areas and the method to be followed. This is what I will attempt to set out. First item of common vision around which the majority will follow going forward is the protection of our Republican values and thereby the protection of our fellow citizens. I said the rise of the far right must be heard in the message that is sending. Many of our fellow citizens who've expressed themselves said they have profound doubts as to what we're becoming, and the existential fear of dispossession, that they're not sufficiently listened to or considered. The fight against this sentiment of dispossession requires heightened firmness against all those who view French citizens as some of rights à la carte. It also implies rights and obligations for the nation and more Republican authority to implement it. A lot has been done. I can return to that during the questions. Recruitment of policemen, of judges, fight against separatism, against drug trafficking, law on immigration, but we're bound to recognize that this wasn't sufficiently seen, understood by the French people. We must implacably continue to act for more security and more firmness, implement the laws that have been passed, such as our European text to reduce illegal immigration. Also, take simple daily decisions. The state managing the question of unaccompanied minors who are a security issue in many countries, also respond more firmly to the rise of delinquent violence. There are a number of radical measures being prepared and respond to this sense of impunity that exists. We've increased the resources of the justice system, but faster, clearer, and more visible sentences to be applied. Republican authority at every level with the clear items that I've just outlined, strengthening our regalian posture. I wish to say this clearly. What we're proposing is more firmness, but within the Republic and its values. That's what opposes us to the two blocs, to the two extremes that I referred to. What's proposed today by the extreme left is a response through community-based politics and Laxism. The right wants to exit through its own values, respond to immigration by no longer respecting the principle of alliance, that it's irrelevant, make the French think that we should disavow our constitutional principles to effectively respond to security issues. We believe we need to be firmer, but through the Republic and by the Republic, we must clearly recognize that this sense of dispossession places the question of secularism at the heart. The Republic must respect all those who believe and all religions, being clear that never a religion should allow one to not respect the laws. We see controversies on a ride because certain associations need to. There's a sense that secularism isn't always clearly applied. As President Chirac did some 20 years ago, we must open up a big effort calmly in the nation and to place with all the elected representatives, all the community-based association companies, open up a major debate on secularism and address the issues that need to be decided upon. The protection of our Republican values unfolds over the long term by educating Republicans citizens who were free. Having introduced civic education, artistic training, we have forged republican rights. Universal national service must be rolled out between now and 2026. And I'd like to stress a final point in this respect. What we're experiencing in the country that creates so much tension is, first and foremost, the failure of our model of integration. It requires efforts by schools, also an integration of all in a fair and balanced manner in economic life, and we must strengthen the fight against discrimination, even if a lot has been done. There's too much economic discrimination. Access to jobs in our country is a possibility in a country that is plural and rich of its diversity to have a genuine republican integration. It is failing too often, leaning French people who are opposed to one another. We believe in this problem of integration through the republican universalism. The other political propositions that will be submitted over the next by the far left, it's the fragmentation of the republic, community-based politics, and the far right, the exclusion of some. Either you're a true Frenchman or you're not, which they continue to say. The response through exacting republican universalism is what we believe in. Secondly, the vision for the next 3 weeks is the ecological and economic ambition. Even in the majority, we don't agree on anything. We all share the idea that the power and independence of France, as well as the funding of our social model, requires a strong economy and the work of all. And on that, we have a record. What I'm saying really is not promises. We've created over 2 million jobs. We've begun to reindustrialize the country, defended its independence, strengthened its sovereignty, agricultural, industrial. We're preparing new texts on the green industry and agriculture that will resume as soon as the French people have expressed their confidence in this majority. There's a solid record. We want to strengthen reindustrialization, open up factories on our soil, recognition of labor, energy independence, agricultural independence. We believe we must free up the tax constraints that weigh on those who want to take initiatives, make life simpler for small and medium-sized companies, encourage work rather than inactivity. We want to invest in R&D, higher education technologies of the future, where France must assume its full role. We never oppose economics and ecology, and those who want to continue on French-style ecology, creating wealth, reduce greenhouse gases, accompany the most vulnerable who are legitimately worried faced with this transition. That's why the future government program will have to endorse powerful decisions such as 8 new nuclear reactors, vital for this transition. It's this economic ambition that will reduce the deficit through wealth creation and ambitious reforms, and government policy must continue to apply budgetary stringency so as not to make the country poorer or weaken the savings of our fellow citizens. The course is clear, uniting everyone and build paths of alliance with all the political leaders I've just referred to. What are the other offers in this regard? The far right tells us we have to choose between the environment and the economy. That's their plan. On the far right, there's no plan to strengthen the economy because they are abandoning everything that makes the country attractive to retain investment. So we can't say we're in favor of reinvestment and agriculture if at the same time we're going to undermine all the reforms that have promoted reinvestment in the country. As to the far left through its totally unreasonable taxation policy. They want to exit nuclear power, still defended by a majority of that elite. It's the impossibility of following a credible green path and the weakening of the country. So the two extreme blocs is a weakening of the country and our fellow citizens getting poorer. Second policy we believe in is that of progress and inequalities of destiny. We all want a protective model. We've demonstrated there's never been as much reinvestment in public services over the past 7 years. France services and justice system, 70% budget increase, security forces in our schools, a greater number of teachers not seen since the 90s, a pay increase for our healthcare workers. If the French model corrects inequality, it doesn't always prevent the course we must chart for the years to come is pretty clear in this regard. We must strengthen our ability to combat those who are lodged where they've grown up and to combat Republican injustices that are unacceptable. The future government will have to have a strengthened, credible response in terms of access to health, combating medical deserts, and also in terms of protecting and supporting our children and our youth. It's a key priority, and for that we'll have to take strong measures. It will, of course, fall to the majority in the campaign, in a government agreement or a platform for action to define this. But for our children, we must act far more. Public support for children and youth for the first 1,000 days to the age of 20. Our children are not supported in the same manner depending on the districts that they come from, and they are very often abandoned when they come from poorest backgrounds. We must increase benefits for children's allowances, family allowances, to prevent these inequalities, and then rebuild our Republican schooling system. And after the basic knowledge and increased number of classes, the teachers will have greater educational freedom and heads who'll be able to hire more readily. Very simple thing: teacher training, respect for teachers, contract with parents, more mathematics, replacing hours of absence. These are initiatives that are vital for our children and our family, and on children and youth to prevent inequalities. There's the question of screens, and I think really that lies at the heart of future policies. All parents are faced with this, all experts say this. Screen addiction is the root of all difficulties, harassment, dropping out of school. And on the back of the work that's been done recently, the government will have to take clear decisions to protect our children, firstly, by not allowing the use of telephones before the age of 11 and access to social media for 15. You need an age for the digital majority. It protects, and we must train for that. Fourth, clear focus area, better daily living, as you know, and we've always focused about the need to be more effective. We've done a lot, but our fellow citizens plainly have sent us a simple message: their life hasn't improved enough. They want their daily lives to improve more. The majority tangible responses. The minister started to do this on the question of the cost of energy and also cost of living. Work must pay better. Lots been done, but I want us to continue to be more ambitious in order to better share the income of work and wealth, and what we've been able to do with bonuses that are tax exempt from the self-employed to salaries of large companies must be looked at again, helping those with modest incomes, and we must address it. It's not costly for the public purse. It's freedom given to the self-employed, to companies to better pay their employees without these additional payroll costs. If those benefits weren't made available, they wouldn't pay that money out. And of course, the minimum wage for all these poorly paid jobs for young people, access to housing, and provide a real response to housing young people. And I recognize here that we haven't made enough progress, and I bear the responsibility for that. And the question of pensions and the life of our retirees after a life of work. Our seniors obviously want to spend a quiet retirement. We've increased the lowest pensions thanks to the pensions reform, and also working under the previous term with other Republicans of all sides, from communists to the Republican right, to improve pensions for farmers. I've heard a lot of rumors. I want to be clear that pensions will be inflation indexed. The retirees shouldn't bear the brunt of things. We must be clear, the majority, the presidential majority, is the only one to propose this, and the cost of living of those who work, young people, to have a real response. What are the others? To go back on the pensions reform, that's to say, to scrap what's been done for those with the most modest means, but above all, to bankrupt the pension system. The Commission's report shows that we're not yet at break-even. So let's hear them explain what they're proposing for our pensioners. They're proposing that they should no longer be able to pay their pensions, or else to have far higher costs, or at least pension contributions that will increase. That all those who are going back on the pensions reform from the far right to the far left, it's either a plan to make employees poorer or to make the pensioners poorer. There's no miracle recipe because they don't want to extend working life. The only responsible plan, transparent, that we did. Okay, it wasn't popular. I discovered that as a project that meets the ethic of response. We live longer, we have to work a bit longer, taking into account longer careers, the most difficult part. What are the two other forces, the opposition forces, that I hope won't be joining the government? Simply something that is incompatible with preserving the cost of living of those who are in jobs or pensioners. Living better is to simplify things with government. We must move towards normative tax stability for the next 3 years, drastically simplify and lighten the links in communities to promote greater proximity and freedom. We must devolve more rapidly, bring greater simplicity, open up the questions of the major regions that have made decision-making more remote, empower our fellow citizens to take decisions, and have efforts aimed at simplification, greater democratic vitality, to avoid the answer being additional spending. To live better is to recognize that in certain towns, certain rural areas, we must have a far more drastic response when it comes to access to public transport, to housing. A lot has been done, but things aren't moving fast enough. It's not well perceived, tangible. We need a fully fledged revolution on that front. And the fifth point to build this ideal is the diplomatic policy and the place of France. There's a consistency in all the government forces of the we have the same vision of the country, of its diplomacy. France, power of peace and balance, relationship with Ukraine, the position regarding the Middle East, but our place in Europe and our vision of Europe of an independent with two military programs that have doubled the budget of the armed forces.
So the two extremes do not allow us to have this. On the extreme left, there's a balkanization of our policies and diplomacy. And it's not really the sort of diplomacy that would work either in the Middle East or Ukraine, because it really means standing up to certain forces and nuclear deterrence and standing up to the others. And if you look at the extreme right, at a historical moment in our lives, in our city, in our country, they are proposing her to leave NATO. This is also something which is going to have a huge impact on our diplomacy, on our balance, and create ambiguity in our relations with Russia. So our point is to clarify what we stand for. That is, to have ideals that are made clear in our proposals to the French citizens. And I think that we can run a campaign along these lines. It will allow us to actually keep ahead and succeed with industrialization and full employment, arrive at a regalian balance, health and unemployment should also be corrected, and a zero-carbon economy. This is an ambitious task and path, but I think it is realistic, and I think that that is what the majority forces should work for. Now, what is the method we can apply? On this, the Prime Minister and all those who represent the majority and all those who are committed to working with him will have to build a program, bring it forward and implement it. But I also wish that we can do this with a constructive, open-minded approach before and after the elections. By this I mean that we are ready to take in proposals from the Social Democrats, people from the ecology parties, Republicans, who could actually contribute and add to this vision. There is a clear vision. There is an ideal which is shared around these 5 axes that I've developed earlier on. And bringing in hundreds of different projects is not something meaning that you have to just come in and apply them later on. What it means is that you've got to have a sincere and humble desire to reach consensus, to reach unity in our country along these 5 axes, and also work on them to enable them. All those who are defending the values of the Republic in an ambiguous manner, who also wish to have a true public debate and who wish to have a stronger France, are welcome to join. And I would just like to say that before and after the elections, we really should have discussions about these different points that I developed. And I also feel that this should allow us to come up with useful solutions. We've already started to do this in the last few years with different national councils. So we should be able to do this with the trade unions, with the local representatives, and with different government authorities, so that we can find the solutions to implement these ideas. Therefore, I think the choices on the 30th of June and the 7th of July is simple. Who can govern govern France, who will be in the right position to look after the futures of our children and also manage the lives of our citizens. And I think you've all understood quite clearly that political forces that represent the majority today, the presidential majority today, are the only ones that can actually bear a realistic and consistent project with this vision for the future. And it is important that these forces can actually implement it and act during the campaign and also after the campaign, after the elections, by grouping together projects, by building jointly and uniting, working jointly to achieve these goals. All those who cannot work with the extremes on either side are welcome to come in and work on this constructive project. They are the ones that I am reaching out for, and I am appealing with a great deal of humility and determination, and the Prime Minister and all the representatives of the present majority will have to work on that in the next 18 days and also between the two rounds. And I wish that from that, the true parliamentary image of France and portrait of France will be born. This is what I wanted to share with you today. These are simple convictions of the ideals and the method that I wish to implement to achieve these ideals. I'm ready to answer all your questions now.